It is that time, Mets fans. How you doing, everybody? Here we are at 8:50 p.m. Eastern. I appreciate everyone first chiming in live on a replay. My name's Wardy. I'm here to break down the latest in Mets land as our offseason has officially begun. After faltering there in Game 6 by a final score of 10-5 in the NLCS against the Dodgers, the Mets now look ahead what is going to be surely not only a hectic offseason, but an entertaining one to say the least. And in today's show, we're going to give you a complete preview, a nice little breakdown on how the Mets are planning to approach this offseason. What free agents do they currently have available out there on the market? Who could potentially be returning versus who could potentially be leaving to an extent? We will touch on that to a degree as I have more future content coming out this week to really hammer that down further. From there, getting into a little bit on the free agent market itself outside the Mets, what players are most desirable? Plenty I'm sure that we're going to repeat constantly time and time again as to, oh, the Mets should go after this guy. Oh, the Mets are going to land this guy. Oh, Juan Soto, how's he not a Met yet? Rest assured, we have a lot to break down in today's show with the key dates that I have right there for you guys from an amazing article from Sports Illustrated, which I greatly appreciate. Shout out to them as well for everything that you guys see on the upcoming important dates here for this Mets offseason. So we're going to break everything down to a T, but I really wanted to kind of start off the show with something a little fun, and that was my personal favorite 2024 Mets moments. And this is something I want to hear from every one of you guys chiming in live on a replay. So to all my replay viewers, I love to see in the comments down below, give me your top 3 to top 5 Mets moments this year, whether they were all recent bias because of the playoff heroics by the Mets, or it was going back to the regular season, the first and second half of the year. Either way, I would love to hear what your favorite and most amazing Mets moments here in 2024 were for the New York Metropolitans. But how you doing, everybody? I appreciate you all chiming in live on a replay. Thank you so much. I know, trust me, I wish I was talking about Game 7 Mets-Dodgers right now. We're not doing that, but the grind is never going to stop here on the platform. We're going to be giving you content pretty much on a daily basis, no less, all throughout the offseason. And I'm really excited to get into this one because, listen, the end of the 2024 Mets is unfortunately here, but the start of something greater for multiple years on end with David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza is just beginning. I see Mike Nixon, great member in here. Jack Palmero, thank you so much. Great member, how you doing? Steve, great member, how are you? We got my man Dave Kaplitz in here, great member. Sanders, Hyper, Frank, going down the list here. Brandon, how you doing? Great member. And also, everybody, wherever you get your audio podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, you name it, make sure you guys leave a 5-star review if you find yourself enjoying the content, as I'll be making sure that more often than not that these segments are out there in audio-only platforms as well. Every single platform, whichever you prefer, we have you covered there. Look up WardyNYM, and you're going to find the short schmuck that is me breaking down all the latest and Metsland. We see Jack, great member as well. Nando, how you doing? Going down the list here. Josh, great member. KT, how you doing? I love going down here even more. Andres, how are you? Luis, Chris, Hyper again. Lane, Peter, going down here. Pete Alonso Prod, how are you? Lewis, Garden State Gardner, how are you, my friend? Goomba, great member. Ramon, thank you guys. Come one, come all. We appreciate you all this evening. I know you guys are saying right away, all right, we got to bring back Polar Bear Pete at this price. Jesse Winker can never be anything other than a Met. Sean Manaea must return to this Mets team. Luis Severino has to come back. All these things in between, and that's what we're going to touch on to a degree in today's show for sure, but we are not going to be long-winded when it comes to some of the topics of, okay, what exact contract is Polar Bear Pete Alonso going to get? Because we're going to beat that to a dead horse, just like beat that a dead horse, just like we're going to do with every other major offseason topic all offseason long until we find out the conclusion of these decisions. I know you're hurt too, and I appreciate you chiming in as always. Bobby G, great member, Buzz Talk Live, and I would like to say first and foremost again, thank you guys so much for the endless support throughout the entire course of the season. What a successful year was for myself, not only personally here on the platform, but just what we have built here on the channel. We saw tremendous growth last night, even though it was a heartbreaking loss for us Mets fans. It was the largest viewed live stream that we've ever had here on the platform. Yes, it officially trumped our 2021 off-season live stream with the Trevor Bauer sweepstakes. And any of my OG followers that know, they certainly know. A lot of you guys found me then. It's absolutely insane that we have now surpassed that, but we're reaching new heights here on the platform, and we're just getting started. So thank you, everyone. If you've been watching my content for months, years, or if this is your first time watching, I greatly appreciate you smashing that like and subscribe button if you enjoy everything on the Mets, because rest assured, we're going to have you covered all off-season long, like we do every single year. Webs Love, how are you? Happy to have you in here as always. Brandon, great member. John, KT, Monarch, Frank, thank you guys kindly. But listen, everybody, what I would love to see from each and every one of you first and foremost are what are your personal favorite moments from this Mets season, because for me, there are so many that stand out, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I kind of made my list fairly quick. I didn't spend more than 25, 30 minutes to really think about games that stood out to me for the most part. So if there are any games I might, pick up on later on throughout either the stream or in the coming days, I will reiterate them to each and every one of you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to reiterate what, in my opinion, were my favorite moments for this Mets season, as well with the highs and the lows, because I'm going to say something that might come as a surprise to some of you. But before I do, let me answer a $20 donation from a great supporter here in Pet Mets. Jack, how you doing? Danny, great member. Josh as well. He says, though the season didn't end the way I wanted, I am proud of this team. I trust Stearns with the future. I also want to give a shout out to the two best PA announcers MLB, Colin Castle, and Marcel Castro. That's awesome. Thank you so much, American. I'm going to butcher that second name, but that's okay. Peb, thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate that. Yes, no, we're very fortunate with everyone that we have there at Citi Field that covers the Mets, whether it's the guys that just go on there, they're announcing the guys that are coming on the field for the Mets, or if they're doing their play-by-play, they're in radio, whatever it might be. We really appreciate every single one of them. But yeah, definitely want to hear how you guys feel about this. My biggest takeaway from this is easily prospects, really good manager and president, big spending owner. Again, a lot of positive takeaways for sure. The ideal offseason would be signing Soto, upgrading the rotation, bullpen, and try to trade McNeil. Yep, definitely in line with all those things for sure. I don't think you're wrong on any of that. But I think you can have a more than ideal offseason without signing Juan Soto. I think the more Mets fans come to the reality that Soto is not necessarily a slam dunk to come here, will set yourself up better should the Mets actually find themselves prevailing in the end and said sweepstakes. That way you're not setting yourself up for failure the way that we kind of have in many previous off seasons. I have been full-fledged right in the thick of that. You guys know that very well. But let's see what your guys' favorite moments are, because I have a bunch of them. But I'm going to start by talking about some moments that might surprise you. Now, 3 moments stand out to me big time when I think of, okay, the best moments this season, and they're all terrible ones. It is the Mets officially becoming 0-5 after being swept by the Milwaukee Brewers in a horrendous fashion. It's the Mets officially becoming 11 games below 500. Those two right away stick out to me. If you're wondering, Wardy, why would you pick the worst moments of the year as your favorite and most memorable? Why were they so notable to me? And the reason why they were most notable, and the same thing goes with what we saw there in Jorge Lopez throwing the glove, is that the Mets need to go through the trenches this year to become the great team that they were. If it wasn't for these trials and tribulations that they had so heavily in the beginning of the season, the entire first half, they would not have built the character in their clubhouse as a tight-knit family-type group, headlined by Lindor, JDM, and Jose Iglesias, among others. This would not be the same team that had the run that they had. I firmly believe, and this goes for a lot of things in life, not just in the case of baseball. You got to go through hardships to really get the best out of yourself, and potentially now in the case of the Mets, the best out of the ball club. So I really think that early adversity, as painful as that was to go through among us Mets fans, as dreadful as it was to cover them on an every single day basis, and trust me guys, I'm with you full-fledged, it was absolutely dreadful covering them throughout those stretches. I'm still here to tell you that without those stretches happening, the Mets don't have the crazy run that they had this year. So I greatly appreciate that, because we had to go through the mud, go through the muck to get out of that, to be in the place where the Mets found themselves in Game 6 of the NLCS. So those are the first moments that stand out the most to me, really kind of setting the tone for the season. It was the calm before the storm, and the storm would be something special. The storm would be something great. And when I think about the first half of this Mets team, there were a couple things that stood out to me, and one of them was certainly Mark Vientos. The blossoming of Mark Vientos cannot be understated this year, in my opinion. We now finally have seen before our very eyes someone who's hopefully going to be impacting us greatly for the next decade plus as an elite slugger in this lineup, whether that's at the hot corner, whether that's getting reps at DH and or first base based on Alonso's future. Either way, Mark Vientos getting the call and right away having a massive walk-off slam there that we saw, not slam, but a walk-off home run against the St. Louis Cardinals when everything was doom and gloom. If the Mets didn't get those walk-off heroics, they would have lost that series if I'm not mistaken, and that was right as Mark came back up with the Mets. So there was a lot in that moment, because it was like, okay, every single time that Vientos is getting an opportunity, even if it isn't consistent, he's blossoming right away. Like there's nothing the Mets can do to take him out of the lineup because of how consistent that he was from the start this year. So Mark Vientos really the start of his tear this year with that home run against the St. Louis Cardinals, which I believe was back in April. I could be wrong. It was April or May. That was absolutely bananas. I also think of a couple other key moments here. And they are as follows. We saw a massive moment there that with Brandon Nimmo in the first half this season. Many of you guys may have forgotten this, but remember when Brandon Nimmo had that tremendous walk-off home run at home for the Mets against the Atlanta Braves when the Mets took that series, or if not, they split? I mean, that was tremendous, right? And that was just gorgeous. That's when Nimmo was on his huge slugging spree the first couple months of the season. You know, he really, unfortunately, slowed down in the second half of the year before the plantar fasciitis became much of an issue heading into postseason play. But Nimmo's first half was fantastic. He was in the groove a lot of the times when other Mets batters simply weren't, and he was barreling baseballs left, right, and center. He was really, really good. So I got to go with Brandon Nimmo. That was a key moment that stood out a lot to me there. And you could take your pick on Sean Manaea's outings this season. There was a couple there. I don't remember specifically the games. I'm going to have to look and know for exactly who we were playing in each one of them, because they get a blur sometimes for me after I cover them every single day throughout the course of the 162. But Sean Manaea had multiple starts this year where he won 7 shutty of at most 1 earned run, striking out between 11 and 13, like literally stuff that we haven't seen since Jacob deGrom, not walking many guys if at all either, just brilliant command of the strike zone, working those quick counts of that arm slot. And I know that Sean faltered as much as he did yesterday, but the Mets go nowhere this year without Sean Manaea's heroics throughout the course of the 162, and then they're initially heading into postseason play, and I greatly appreciate him for that. I also think of Luis Torrens in the first half this season. I know you guys are probably saying, what is Wardy talking about? Let's not forget that London trip, guys. That could have been a miserable couple game stand for the Mets there against the Philadelphia Phillies. And while the Mets did drop that game 1, that game 2 was all the more special there to get the double play to end the game with Torrens with the heads-up play, even with a fellow catcher, the schmuck that he was. And Garrett Stubbs was so happy to see him kicked out playoffs in the first round imaginable by the Mets. That was amazing. With Stubbs diving in there that we saw from third to home, really trying to take out Torrens. Torrens, though, with the quick tag that we see at the home plate, gets to throw to first like that. It doesn't get any better than that. So Torrens' heads-up play when he first came to Queens, right after the Mets acquired him from the Yankees for $100K cash, and that was basically it. And he had an immediate staple there for the Mets, and that was kind of the start of the turning of the tide there, because that's where we were getting towards the end of May. And then as we got towards the end of May and Lindor started bat leadoff, I believe that first game was against the Miami Marlins, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am, but I think it was against the Marlins, and the rest is history. You know, Lindor's overall season, there are just so many moments I think of, but obviously two that stick out like a sore thumb for the best reasons imaginable are as follows. Lindor's huge home run there, go-ahead home run after Edwin Diaz gets rocked there in the 8th inning against the Atlanta Braves in Game 1 of the doubleheader. For him to get that go-ahead home run and for the Mets to win it the way that they did was so special. Then the grand slam to secure the NLDS victory over the Phillies. I mean, that's just stuff that you're going to have chills down your spine and you're going to think of for years on end. Polar Bear Pete Alonso with the home run heroics there against the Brewers with 2 outs left for the Mets season. I mean, that is just absolutely insane to think about. There's so many big home runs. I mean, take your pick with all of Vientos home runs as well, but that's a little bit more recency bias, but Mark deserves it. Again, Mark Vientos has a Mets record right now, a literal Mets record for the most RBIs in one single playoff run by a Met. He now has 14, which is 2 above, I believe, Curtis Granderson, who I believe was in second. Torrens' best moment. Yeah, Torrens is in the mix, absolutely. If you guys remember the context of that Luis Torrens play, that was massive in the first half. That wasn't the only play that stood out a lot to me. That's why I'm referencing them all. But that one was the start of the changing of the tide for this Mets team. And that's what I'm really trying to bear in mind, kind of how we went about the first quarter of the season, the second quarter, the third, and the fourth. And we also saw some other key moments in there, you know, between when not only acquiring Jesse Winker, but that massive walk-off home run to take the series against the Baltimore Orioles, which was so, unbelievably good. Again, Jesse just absolutely yelling big time. That was so sick to see. That walk-off heroic there to secure it against the Orioles was massive, because then that was right before the Mets began their huge road stand there in Cali against the Padres, where the Mets split because they unfortunately got walked off by Jackson Merrill to end that series from Edwin Diaz. And then we saw there Corbin Carroll rallied all the way back for the Diamondbacks, and they took game 1 of that series, but then the Mets took games 2 and 3. David Pearson pitched a gem in there as well, and then the Mets also took care of business and got the job done against the White Sox. That was what felt like truly a death valley for the Mets, where they wouldn't make postseason if they couldn't get out of that rut. And they not only got out of that rut, but they had a supreme record throughout that stretch. So All these things really stands out to me. You know what I mean? The hardships is what set up the amazing moments. Without those, we can't have the great things. And the great things that the Mets had really came from every little aspect of this lineup at the course of the year. The rotation as well. Jose Quintana gave us some massive outings when we needed it. Luis Severino certainly did, especially in the first half to provide length. Bullpen-wise, Reed Garrett just became absolutely unhittable to start the season, which was so fun. The first 3 weeks of the year when Reed Garrett was in the bullpen, there was no reliever better, so that was a really fun stretch. And Jose Iglesias, when he initially, debuted OMG the song and really rallied behind that, had some walk-off heroics for the Mets. JD Martinez had a big walk-off bomb against the Miami Marlins there, and I believe May, when there was just so much doom and gloom going on. The list goes on, but those are certainly ones that stand out a lot to me. So if you guys have any specific moments that stand out to you this season most that are maybe different from the ones that I just said, or the same, by all means relay them here in the live show in the comments down below. We would love to hear it, as always, everybody. And we are going to transition into breaking down what is next for the Mets now and this offseason here in just a moment. But Nimmo is definitely the heart soul of the Mets. Him and Lindor alike, as is the case with Alonso too. All guys that we hope are together here. The band's back together for 2025. Let's see here. A lot of Ronnie Mauricio talk. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about Ronnie this year. Don't you guys worry. Yeah, we're going to have plenty on him. Frank, thank you so much for the $20 donation. Frank says, Pete's 3-run shot in Milwaukee. Yep, still sends chills down my spine. Could not agree more, my man. That was amazing. Mark Vientos is just so effing good. I mean, we're all drooling over him. I mean, that goes without saying at this point. Hyper, thank you so much for the $10 donation. Hyper says, thank you, Wardy. Thank you for the 2024 Mets. This was the most fun sports team I ever experienced in my life, despite its end. Hunt over, but we'll always cherish it. Hope to see them win next year, but for now, New York Ranger time. LGM. Couldn't agree more, Hyper. Thank you so much for that donation. Let's go Rangers. I know we got people that hate the Rangers too, and that's okay. You guys just don't like the superior team, and that's fine. And I'm just busting chops right now. I'm a Steelers fan too, so I'm just like, for my Jets-Mets fans, I know you guys are, so you had a bad day. It's basically that times 10, I apologize to all you guys, especially my man Richie at Jets Media, Knicks Media. And one final thing I will say, guys, I want to remind you before we get into more on the show, Knicks fans, listen up. Wardy is giving you weekly Knicks coverage beginning tomorrow on the Knicks Media platform. I will be joining my good friend Richie, who is the host of the Knicks Media platform, one of the best Knicks YouTubers out there. We love Richie, and we're going to be doing a watch party together for the Knicks season debut there against the Boston Celtics in Boston. Oh my God, the key matchup between Kristaps and Cat right away. Celtics raising the banner. It doesn't get any better than that to kickstart the season, and I simply cannot wait. So to my Knicks fans out there, tune in tomorrow. Right around game time is when it's going to be happening there for that watch party, and you guys will be getting post-game coverage from me from at least one, if not multiple games, weekly every single week on the Knicks Media platform throughout the course of the Knicks season. So if you guys want to not only hear Wardy's Mets and overall MLB content thoughts, you're going to now hear my Knicks thoughts as well, as I've been doing over the past year. But now we're going to up the ante even more this year. So looking forward to that for all you guys as always. Let's see. What spiral has Pete been in? He's hit more home runs than anyone in MLB over the last 5 years. That's a downward. Yeah, I'm assuming that's from a back and forth Goomba. That makes sense. Let's see here. Number 1, Pete's home run. 2, Lindor's grand slam against the Phillies. 3, the 0-5 to OMG. 4, the walk-off rally on the Giants. 4-3, I was there for it in the regular season. That was a big one, too. I'm glad you brought that. That's a really good one, too, actually. One I forgot about for a minute. The dead weight is obvious, and Brazoban, Ottavino, Maton, and Martina. Brazoban isn't going anywhere. He has multiple years of control, and the Mets will try to get the best out of him in high leverage, and I think he will adjust. I think Brazoban, I'm going to call it right now, I think Huascar Brazoban will be one of the best relievers for the Mets to kickstart next season. The reason why I say that is he will have a proper camp with the Mets, be able to try to handle high leverage better. The guy's nasty stuff, and he's not going anywhere. In the case of Ottavino, though, is going to be, 39-40. In the case of Phil Maton, I believe, is on the multi-year deal as well, so I don't think Maton is going anywhere yet either. JDM is a different discussion. He knows he's probably playing pickleball until at least February until someone considers giving him a call, but that is not going to come from the Mets unless it's a coaching position at this rate, more than likely. What would I do if we signed Soto? I would lose my effing mind, to say the least. Yes, we'll worry about that when we get there, my man, because right now is not as much about the talk on Juan Soto as it is for what is next for this Mets team this offseason. And something to bear in mind that we really cannot forget for the Mets when it comes to what their approach is going to be this year with the offseason. A lot has to do right away with the qualifying offer. Let's not forget that, everybody. For those that don't know, the qualifying offer this year that we know we'll be beginning is going to be around $21.05 million. So what does this mean? The Mets will have an option to throw some qualifying offers at players. They're going to do it to more than one. They're probably going to do it to at minimum 3. And those 3 players are more than likely going to be Pete Alonso, Sean Manaea, and Luis Severino. Why, you might ask? Because these are all guys that are going to more than likely deny the qualifying offer because they're going to be looking for longer-term contracts this offseason. So that way, if the Mets do lose any of those players, the teams that sign said players are going to have to give the Mets a compensation pick in order to do so. So hopefully the Mets kind of keep those guys, try to keep the band together the best way they possibly can. This is a way that helps them because some teams are deterred from going after guys with QOs because they don't want to give up that draft pick, whereas other teams are more willing because they simply don't care as much because they're not as invested in the draft as they are about winning now. But regardless, the Mets, with full intent to hopefully bring back a good portion of their active free agents, are now going to have Polar Bear Pete Alonso, the Simone Southpaw Sean Manaea, and the consistent right-handed ace deemed by some throughout the course of the 162, especially in the first half, and Luis Severino. And the Mets are going to find themselves in good position, hopefully, that they can bring back at least 2 of the 3. And we're going to talk at great length over the next coming days about guys I think will be staying versus who's going to be leaving this offseason on the premature aspect of what we know to this point at this point in time. And what we also know is all the following dates that you guys can see to my side. Again, shout out there to Sports Illustrated. Their New York Mets latest article has a nice breakdown on all the key dates upcoming for the Mets that we should all know about. And instead of me going out of my way to kind of put them all up together, they did it beautifully for me. So shout out to them, and I appreciate that. And guys, I'm going to answer more of your comments here in a second. Before I do, though, I definitely want to know, in your opinion, guys, which player out of the 3 do you hope the Mets return next season the most? Between Alonso, Severino, and Manaea, if you had to pick one, which one stands out the most to you? Obviously, Alonso, I think, feels like the most to many. But in case you guys feel different about that, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are going to be in the chat here. Mike with the $5 donation. How you doing, Mike? Hey, Wardy. Feel like I can finally stop stressing about the Mets for a while. Doubt they'll get Soto if he helps the Yanks get a ring, though. I mean, he's definitely helped the Yanks get a ring, but Soto already has a ring. If he wins a second by the age of 26, he's going to be prioritizing that bag first and foremost, for sure. I don't think that's really going to change much at this rate, but thank you for the donation, Mike. Thank you for your service. We appreciate you. You've been an amazing supporter this season, and this is the reason why I asked you guys what you prefer out of the 3 players, because to my surprise a little bit, there's some of you guys saying you want Sean Manaea back more than Alonso, which is crazy to me, because as much as I love Sean Manaea, and I do love Sean, I have no problem letting Sean walk and having Alonso come back on more of a team-friendly contract if it means Sean is going to get a big long-term contract elsewhere, because unlike some of you Mets fans, I have zero interest in giving Sean Manaea, even, once we get to the 5-year mark, I'm really having question marks. I personally will not go past 3 or 4 years for Sean Manaea. I really wouldn't. I think 5+, and it's going to be something that's going to backfire for the team. Not that they can't handle down the road, so that's why I'm not overly concerned by it. But, especially for a guy in Sean who could try to maximize his value to get a north of a 7-year deal, I think that there's a lot of reasons to believe that relationship's going to rekindle. He was very emotional that we saw yesterday, too, that we saw from Sean himself. He definitely wants to return, as is the case with Jesse Winker and among others. These are all guys that we would love to see back and return the Mets. I don't think anyone is really denying that. And I think, as JD Martinez put so greatly in his post-game coverage, not post-game coverage, but his post-game comments yesterday, rather, he stated how this is the first clubhouse I've been in that really didn't have any egos. Just felt like a tight-knit family-type group, and that was a special one. And obviously, we would love to run it back. And I think the Mets would love to run it back, too, to an extent. But with a lot of guys coming off the books, north of $200 million, with a lot of key free agents on the bullpen and rotation front, the Mets are going to be very creative with their dollars, and I think that is certainly a good thing. So for Sean, I would love to have him return, but he's definitely one of those guys I am not in favor of locking on to a very long-term deal, just because I don't know if the consistency nor the health is going to be there for someone like him. But if you can get him in that 3-4 year range, maybe at best with a 5th year option, then I'm willing. But beyond 5 years, I'm going to be very, very stubborn. And I think Sean has already realized, what his worth is and what the Mets can provide for him, because we have a very wealthy owner. So it's not like Sean wouldn't get paid paid handsomely by Cohen. But even if it means to take a slight pay cut to avoid maybe those final couple years versus taking that bigger contract elsewhere, I think Sean could be that one exception among maybe some other guys in the organization that, for all we know, maybe might be slightly less willing than someone in Manaea, who definitely had an emotional year, the best season he's ever had in his major league career. But before we talk more about the players, because we're going to highlight them plenty in today's segment, don't you guys worry. Let's pan briefly here to what we have in the dates. Then from there, we're going to talk about our amazing sponsor at BetUS, and then we'll hop back in and talk more about the players, what's next for the Mets, the key free agents right now, and where things are kind of standing at this front. But as of November 11th, everybody, we have the BBWAA award finalists announced. From November 13th to the 17th, we have the All MLB Weekend that are there in Las Vegas. November 19th, the Manager of the Year winners announced. Carlos Mendoza is not only a likely candidate, but a likely finalist and should be the likely winner. Mendy, as a first-year manager, is without question most deserving. For him to do what he did against the Brewers there, thanks to Alonso as well, in my opinion, trumps Murphy between the two. Both first-time managers this year, too. Both guys that were basically not Mendy replacements, but rather Craig Counsell replacements, because the Mets try to get Craig first, didn't happen. They pivot to Mendy, and Murphy comes in and stays in-house for the Brewers, and both have better runs as manager than Craig Counsell ever did there in Chicago. It's amazing how things work in baseball like that, isn't it, guys? It really is. But we see there, November 21st, the most valuable players are announced. Lindor will be a candidate, but he unfortunately will not be the winner. It will go to Ohtani. December 19th to the 12th, the winter meetings in Dallas officially begin. Team decision makers and agents will gather in one location where significant free agent signings and trades often occur. This is what we know. If you guys don't know what we do during the winter meetings, we cover the winter meetings every single day. We do very long live streams on the platform. We give you quick updated videos as well with any news or rumor coming out, and we usually have reporters actively on scene there. Now going to be in Dallas, so I'm going to hit up my guy Pat Ragazzo. I know he's going to be on the beat there. I know Jolly, that many of you guys know, will more than likely be there representing for John Boy Media. So just like we did last year, I'll probably see Jolly if he's bored, if he wants to chime in, and anyone else there. I know that's going to be an absolute blast of a time there in the winter meetings in Dallas. And then we have December 15th, the international signing period closes. That's going to be very exciting, because around that time is when we're going to be hearing that the Mets are going to be signing a very top shortstop. I believe the Mets already have in place to sign one of the top, if not the top infield international prospect in all of the game right now. One of them for sure. He's getting the highest bonus yet, surpassing Francisco Alvarez and others in recent years, which we're very excited about. But we'll talk more about that when the timing's right, because the timing isn't right at the moment. January 9th, salary arbitration figures exchanged between players and clubs. So that's where we're going to see if anyone's going to play hardball there in arbitration or not. That's where David Stearns was famously known for some of his negotiations there with the Milwaukee Brewers, where they were penny pinching, whereas the Mets won't be as stubborn to an extent, depending on the players we're talking to. Then you have the Hall of Fame class there towards the end of January. Pitchers and catchers report back in February, and then we have spring training first week of March. I will be in spring training more than likely for the first week, covering the Mets there in Port St. Lucie with many of you guys as well, and that's that. So those are all the key things that you guys need to know now for the offseason, what is entailing. So right now, we can kind of have a breather, kind of get things mapped out, have fixated in our head what are our free agent wish lists, what are our trade wish lists, what are just the things we want to change for the Mets heading into 2025 for the better. But the great thing, guys, is that this is not an offseason where the Mets are going to be in desperate need for an entire offense, an entire coaching staff, an entire front office, because between the prospects that the Mets have in-house right now that they're expecting to give opportunity to begin in spring training heading into the regular season next year, paired with, yes, the Mets are going to be having north of $200 million now off the books, but even having said that, they're not going to spend stupid. So even if the Mets go out and get Soto, maybe the Mets go out and land at least one ace caliber starter in the free agent class among the Corbin Burns, the Max Frieds, even though he's not an ace, the Walker Buehlers, etc. of the world, all the guys in that mix. The Mets are not going to be inclined to spend massive on key relievers, because they know that to get the best out of relievers is more often than not what happens in-house with your player development, as well as guys that you really pick up a lot of times in the waiver wire. You make proper adjustments. You get the best out of them because you invest more in your pitching lab than anything else. That's what the Rays do. That's what the Guardians do. That's what the A's do, and it leads to great success. And that's what the Mets have really built this past year. We've all seen how well their pitching lab has really blossomed before our very eyes. In the second half, heroics of a lot of guys, too. Germany Hefner definitely played a factor, but so did the entire pitching lab, going back to Port St. Lucie with guys when they're coming back from injury to rehab, among other things. And speaking of rehab, that just reminded me that Paul Blackburn is a New York Met, so there's that. We'll see how that factors in things heading into 2025 for the rotation, but rest assured, the Mets are going to have a very busy offseason, but this is not going to be a busy offseason where we feel like everything is on the line. The Mets have an expectation now among the fans and among the media, but this is not one of those where it's like, okay, now we need an entire front office. We need an entire coaching staff. No, most of what you got in the front office and the coaching staff is what you're likely going to see in 2025. I would expect a change in there in the heading coaching staff with Eric Chavez and Barnes. That's a recipe for disaster. It's not consistent. It's to do or die, and that's one that I do expect to change 1,000% this offseason. But outside of some more front office roles where David's going to be hiring more of his in-house guys, not in-house, but rather guys he wants to bring in-house that he knows from the Brewers or previous organizations, just colleagues that he knows that were otherwise, people that have been in the Mets organization for a little too long. We've seen a couple guys in the front office for the Mets exit the season prematurely because we know that Stearns is bringing in some not homegrown talent, but his personal picks. So that's a good thing. This is kind of the first offseason under Steve Cohen where we don't have to stress about those very important top tier things from the front office to the coaching staff. So now when we look at what they need to work on, it's the bullpen, it's the rotation, it's handling their upcoming free agents. And as we talk about their upcoming free agents, everybody, they are as follows. Buckle up, let's read them off together, folks. Here we have Polar Bear Pete Alonso as the number 1. Harrison Bader, outfielder, number 2, in no particular order. Number 3, we're going to have here in JD Martinez at DH. Number 4 is Mr. Luis Severino. Then we have Sean Manaea. Sean obviously has his current player option, but he's going to be opting out of that. And even if he gets a QO, he's not going to accept that either. He's going to be looking for a new contract. Drew Smith is 100% not coming back. I'd be very surprised if he did. Ryan Stanek is a guy who I really hope the Mets do bring back, even after him floundering yesterday. Again, I just would have liked Diaz to start that inning, but shame on me for thinking that. Jesse Winker, that I think every Mets fan wants back, and Jesse desperately wants to come back too. So I'm going to be completely frank. This is one of those guys that I fully expect to return. You will not see Jesse Winker in my Mets who will not return content in the coming days. I assure you, he will be the one guy that I can confidently tell you right now he's not in that video or live stream, because there's not a chance in hell that Jesse Winker is not a Met next season. If he's not a Met next season, I'm going to be beyond pissed off. Beyond pissed off. The only exception is if you sign Jock Pearson, because Jock Pearson is basically the other version of Jesse Winker, but more of a true power hitter on the home run front, and a guy that would seamlessly fit there as a DH lefty bat option / corner outfield. So again, it's got to be Jock Pearson or Jesse Winker. We all want Jesse to come back. If somehow, some way he doesn't, Jock needs to be the replacement, and there can be no in between. Those are the only two options, and I'm giving you David Stearns, so make sure that you choose wisely, but it starts and ends with Jesse Winker. Outside of Winker there, we're going to have Shintaro Fujinami. We spent $1 million. If you would have cracked him, would be roster. It didn't happen, but Shintaro, who looked really strong towards his final number of outings there in AAA, I won't be surprised if the Mets let him walk, but that is a name that I'm curious if the Mets decide to try to develop more and the organization to see if he can impact their bullpen next year. Now, a guy who did not impact the Mets bullpen at all this year, just like Shintaro Fujinami, however, is hopefully a guy the Mets can bring back. And I really think that after the run that they had, unless this man wants to go to a smaller market, which maybe that's his personality, it's Brooks Raley. Brooks Raley is the guy that we need to do or die all year long. Not having Brooks Raley and being reliant on the Danny Yons of effing Jake. Remember Jake Diekman? Because I sure as hell wish I didn't. The Jake Diekmans of the world, the Alex Yons of the world. These are all just subpar lefty options in your bullpen when you have a Brooks Raley coming off there and the adjusted TJ. If we could have him ready, if he will be ready for next season, man, he would be amazing for this Mets team. I would love to bring Brooks Raley back if that is at all possible. I'm that high on Jock Pearson. I'll simply put the Mets have been desperately needing a Jock Pearson type bat in their lineup to help balance the lefty balance there with their power, because outside of Lindor and Nimmo, the Mets really were looking for that big bat. They got it in Jesse Winker, and Jock profile is very similar to Jesse. So that's what I'm saying. It's more about Jesse's such a seamless fit for this Mets team, but God forbid if for some odd reason you don't bring him back, or if he decides to go elsewhere, Jock is the perfect pivot if not the priority, because Jock has more home run power, has a great personality, a lot of playoff heroics as well, steps up with high leverage situations, runs the scoring position, that platoon type hitter, very similar to Jesse Winker. It's actually funny how much similarities the two have between each other. So that's why, again, if you don't bring Jesse back, you got to bring in Jock Pearson. That's all I got to say on that. But I really, really hope they bring in Jesse Winker. I feel like that's a foregone conclusion right now, and I'm going to be talking about Jesse and how much I love that man every single day until we find out Tucci's coming back. What are my thoughts on Anthony Santander? He's a great bat for sure. That's probably going to get overpaid big time this offseason. And for the Mets, I'm not interested in the Mets going after a Santander who is, not the best outfielder. Profile is better at DH at times, but if you trade Starling Marte, that completely changes the complexion. And that's another big thing, everybody. You got to bear that in mind. Like, if the Mets are going to do any of these key moves on the outfield front, it's probably going to come with other key decisions. Like, Harrison Bader is likely not coming back. Like, maybe one of Bader or Tyrone Taylor does come back as a fourth outfielder again, but those guys are both very expendable. We appreciate some of the key moments they had for the Mets this year, but they are not guys that we need to have back. Whereas when we look at Starling Marte really stepped up down the stretch. He had a really bad game yesterday to close it out, but hey, 4-hit game prior, I won't forget that there in Game 5 to step up at Citi Field for the Mets. Kyle Tucker is one of my favorite players in all the American League. I would love for the Mets to pursue him. That's a discussion kind of for another day, too, when we look at more targets based on guys that could potentially make sense. But this is what I'm talking about. Marte, McNeil, these are guys where do not be shocked if the Mets find themselves potentially wanting to part with. And we'll expand more on this, so I'm not going to be long-winded here with it. Just know that they have a lot of avenues that they can go down. Cody Bellinger fills a lot as well, too. Yeah, Bellinger's a more versatile option, plays elite defense, too. That's a big difference, but Belly's not necessarily a guy I see the Mets prioritizing right away. Not to say it can't happen. I'm just saying the Mets are going to prioritize pitching first and foremost. Juan Soto, Pete Alonso. That is how they're going to start their offseason full-fledged right away. And then they will go from there. Jose Iglesias. I didn't even mention Mr. OMG himself. Now, I think it goes without saying, guys, but even with Jet Williams, even with Ronnie Mauricio, even with Luis Angel Acuna, just to name a few of like the top infield prospects that are expected to impact the Mets next year. By a raise of hands, who many of you would like to see Jose Iglesias back with the Mets, even if that's in a lesser role, really more so coming off the bench than getting consistent starting reps? Because I think this would be a perfect fit to bring Mr. OMG back, because Jose Iglesias will be a high contact hitter yet again next season. I firmly believe that, but the legs are going to get slower. The hands are great, but the legs are going to continue to deplenish a little bit year after year. And Iglesias, as great and as consistent as his hitting has been, it is now time for the Mets to give a proper opportunity to their in-house options. Now's the time to do it, to have that balance from their veteran leadership to their young players. So why not have them both collectively together like what they did when they called up Acuna? That's what I want to see the Mets do here. So I say bring back Jose Iglesias. You know he's not going to cost you much, right? And you're going to bring him back. He's going to love it. And then you're going to really have him be a further mentor for those middle infielders and the Ronnie Mauricios. And there in the Jet Williams, who's looking to really impact the Mets as soon as next season. And there in Luis Angel Acuna, who was in a buzzsaw right away when he got called up by the Mets. I think that's a great balance for them. Have one of those youngsters, at minimum one of them, getting starting reps there at second base, assuming that the Mets have made a decision on Jeff McNeil as well, because Jeff is another guy that I just don't see any world whatsoever that the Mets are going to allow him to block any one of their younger guys there in that position to begin next season. It really just makes a lot of sense to bring Jose back, have him in a more limited role, and if, for say, God forbid, injuries happen, inconsistencies happen, the guys just aren't looking good, they aren't developing the way they were hoping throughout the first couple months, and you gave them plenty of leashes, then have Jose get more consistent reps and hope that that is enough for you to hold it down for a stretch of the season like it was this year. That is something that I really do hope happens. And Jose Quintana is a lone starter that I didn't mention yet, really. That is a guy that, some of you Mets fans may want back. Quintana is one of those guys that the Mets may teeter with if they're going to throw a qualifying offer on. But the risk is if you throw a qualifying offer to Jose Quintana, he may actually accept it. Kind of like Carlos Carrasco, right? Remember when the Mets gave Cookie a QO a year plus ago and that just failed terribly right from the start? Quintana is not getting any younger. While he did have some sharp outings and he was consistent in stretches for the Mets this season, one we really appreciate it, he is another one of those veteran options that I don't know the Mets really want to defer to, or if they rather really consider guys that are less soft tossing or at least, you know, are guys that we know can potentially give us more length on a consistent basis. Quintana gave us length down the stretch, which was awesome, but there were just moments of inconsistency that I wonder if the Mets could upgrade in that area for a similar price. Now, that's where you look at, obviously, the Yusei Kikuchis that are going to be looking for a bag this offseason as well. That's a guy that the Mets have been linked to the past couple years. Even back at the trade deadline this past year, they were actively involved in the Kikuchi market, but he was overpaid big time there to be sent there to the Astros. He had a great run with the Astros, but the point is that there are a lot of interesting options, and when I evaluate the rotation, you got to expect Brandon Sproat is going to be in this rotation at some point next season, and not to begin the year, because the kid is just that effing good. You look at also other guys, Jonathan, Noah McLean. We could see at least one of those guys breaking out, if not before them, in the Mike Vassos, Blade Tidwells. Not that those guys overly dominated in AAA last year, but rather they may get closer to being MLB ready. Over a Ton specifically, as an experienced as Ton is. McLean is awesome, but I think he has some more fine-tuning to do. Brandon Sproat is pretty much just about, as soon as he can really handle himself and he's really looking sharp and sprain, the Mets should really have I think the Mets should have an open rotation spot there for Sproat to begin the season. You're going to have a healthy Kodai Senga, which is massive. So right now, the Mets rotation is pretty much nothing. You have Kodai Senga, Tyler McGill to consider things again, David Peterson, and Brandon Sproat. So you do have Tyler McGill, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Brandon Sproat. So that's 4. You ideally want 3 of those 4 actually in the rotation, with McGill on the outside looking in right now, just for obvious reasons and how things are configured. We know what we're getting with Tyler at his best and at his worst right now. We've been through this before. David Pearson, though, absolutely is deserving to not only be a starter, but to be a top 2, if not top 3 starter for the Mets paired with Senga next season. So you're looking at still 3 formidable options, 2 guaranteed options, 1 question mark with a lot of potential in Sproat, and then McGill, a guy that will likely get starting reps because of injuries, because that always happens to begin the season. But you still want to add at least 2 starters, right? You want to have a Sean Manaea and or a Luis Severino. You may want to bring in a Corbin Burnes and or a Walker Buehler. So it is not a guarantee at all that both Sean and Severino come back to this Mets team, and I don't want Mets fans to think that. I just don't want you guys to be set up for failure and think, oh my goodness, it's such great runs, they're 100% coming back. No. While I do think that we could see both those guys return, Severino, I wouldn't be shocked if he went back to the Yankees. I really wouldn't be, especially if the Yankees say win it all and they would like to bring Sevy back, because Sevy kind of found his game again. Again, I'm not opposed to bringing Severino back at all, but I think the Mets need to make sure that they add 1 more starter on the higher end beyond what we saw this year. Because Senga, as great as he is, we need to make sure he can stay healthy, because if the Mets just go down in injury, you know, it would be nice if we had multiple ace caliber options. I know our rotation had moments of really exemplifying that throughout the course of the 162, but that Corbin Burnes is a man that has been linked to the Mets in oh so many ways, and there's a specific note on Corbin Burnes, which I plan to discuss with you guys over the next week as to why I have a level of optimism on that front for someone like him personally. But yeah, there are a lot of rotation options for this Mets to consider this offseason, but they do start with their in-house ones that we've seen over the past year in Quintana, and Manaea, and Severino. And between those 3, everybody, I know I asked with Alonso earlier, so I'll ask now. I'm on rotation, guys. Between those 3, which starters do you think will return to the Mets next season? Let us know in the live show in the comments down below. That's greatly appreciated, everybody. Who do you think is actually going to return to this Mets team, and why? Do you expect them all to return? Do you expect none to return? Do you expect 1 or 2 to return? Let me hear in the live show. Thank you guys for the donations, as always, for the likes, the subscriptions. I greatly appreciate that. If you guys haven't already, if you haven't already and you enjoy our coverage, please make sure to smash the like and subscribe button. If you guys could help us get to 250 plus likes by the end of the live show with over 500 viewers right now, all half you guys gotta do is smash a like button, and we're just a couple hundred subs away from 28,000 on the platform. If you guys could help us there too, if you're new or a recurring viewer and haven't yet, greatly appreciate it, and thank you so much for doing exactly that. We're going to talk more here about these players in a minute, folks, and talk about some free agents there in the external market that I think the Mets could find themselves eyeing up. Some are obvious, some are maybe not as obvious as you think, and we will have more formidable actual lists of these players, top rankings, all those things in the coming days over the next couple weeks. So be on the lookout for those, as always, everybody. But before we get into more on all these respective topics, we always got to talk about our amazing friends here at BetUS, because especially with the NBA season beginning up and starting up tomorrow, there are just so many exciting things to talk about on that front that I'm really, really excited to do exactly that. So guys and gals, listen up. We have our amazing friends here at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Yankees are the money line underdog to kickstart their series there in the World Series against the Dodgers. Dodgers are the money line favorite on minus 123 there. And listen, that's a game that could go either way. I'm actually not going to touch game one between the Yankees and the Dodgers. I'll circle back to that there after game one to see if we're going to place any World Series bets. What I am going to emphasize, however, is what we have going in the NBA with their slates, with the Knicks Celtics there tomorrow, as the Knicks are a plus 180 money line underdog. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm biased, and I love how my Knicks go toe-to-toe, even against the reigning champs and the Celtics in Boston. I've seen this Knicks team go out and take down Boston in Boston with a lesser club than what they have right now. I really, really am excited. I cannot wait to see how Karl Anthony Towns goes toe-to-toe there with Kristaps, assuming Kristaps is in the line for them and everything. So I'm going with my Knicks. They're at plus 5.5, minus 110. Not doing the money line. I'm going to play it safer. I'm going to go plus 5.5 there, which I absolutely love. And then I'm also going to take, as we see the Timberwolves and the Lakers, we got Randall and we got Dante facing off against the Lake Show. We got the Magic and the Heat. We got the Cavs and the Raptors. There are a lot of other good ones as well that I'm looking at just from the spread alone. But I am going to eye up one more game here, and that other game that I am going to eye is going to be none other than here what we have with the New Orleans Pelicans and the Chicago Bulls. I don't know what we're getting in Alonzo Ball returning, as much as I'm very happy for him to return. I am a huge Zion Williamson fan. I've been following him literally since high school. I'm damn excited to see what Zion can do here. We're going to go with minus 7.5 against Chicago, and maybe this one is a bit of a crazy pick, but I will always want to try to pair a two-leg parlay, so we're going to do exactly that. That's going to be 10 to win 9. They're straight on the Knicks bet, and that's going to be 10 to win 9 on the Pelicans, and that's a total for 20 to win 53, so 20 to win 73 if the Knicks hit on plus 5.5, meaning that they got to make sure that they don't lose by more than 5.5 runs, or they, 5.5 points if they win outright. And for the Pelicans, they got to make sure that they win by at least their 7.5 against the Bulls. So that's what we're going for, a two-leg parlay. And you guys can tail by using our amazing promo code at YouTube150. That way you too get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, a 125 bonus on your second, and your third, up to $2,000 for all your sports betting needs. Bet responsibly. I'm not a betting expert. I'm just a diehard sports fan that loves to place my daily bets here with BetUS. But now let's hop back into this one, and I do apologize, folks. You guys know the drill. If I didn't freak you out at least once with the intro, I'm doing something wrong. That was a complete accident, though, so I do apologize. And now let's get back into breaking down more on what the Mets have with what they have available this offseason. Because, guys, there's so much money off the books for the Mets. It's honestly a little surreal. And a fantastic article which breaks this down for you guys comes from the one and only Jeff Passan there of ESPN. As you guys know, Jeff is a fantastic beat reporter there for all MLB, breaking news constantly. It's basically the Woj or Shams, if you will, there of the MLB, and he's been doing great things. And he had a great article that we saw today on the Mets season and how they went from LOL to OMG. As we take a look ahead into the offseason, we know that a lot's coming off the books, and let's see here specifically from what Passan had to say, because this is all true. And I quote, let's see, going to highlight this right here. I'm going to highlight this entire segment. The Mets have somewhere in the range of $190 million in salaries coming off the books this winter, including some difficult decisions to make in Alonso, one of the franchise's most popular players, enters free agency after a postseason with 4 home runs and a .999 OPS, potentially gone, as well as Iglesias, Martinez, Winker, and Bader, who all contributed on the field and in shift in the clubhouse culture, and left-hander Sean Manaea, who can opt out of the deal when he signed in January. Yeah, out of all those players, there are at least three that I expect the Mets to return. Hopefully more, but at least 3 that stand out right there. And again, you're looking at a Mets team still that is having plenty off the books without any of those players. Their payroll currently clocks in around $160 million, and for a roster that needs augmentation more than reimagination, and that's absolutely huge. So what we're saying is Steve Cohen has big pockets and an offseason that he can spend, unlike last year. So the Mets not doing much last offseason set themselves up so brilliantly, and then to add insult to injury in the best way possible. So it's insult to injury if you're an opposing fan, but not if you're a Mets fan, is as follows. My apologies, folks. I sneezed there. But listen, the Mets go from an offseason where they were transitioning with their new front office, coaching staff, and then a so-called punt year, to making all the way to the NLCS. They didn't trade away any key talent there at the trade deadline either, and now they have all their recouped assets to potentially utilize 4 big trades come this offseason, as well as big free agent spending. This is why the Mets will be going out of their way for Juan Soto. This is why the Mets will be going out of their way for one of the key, if not multiple key frontline starters. This is why the Mets will still be very savvy with their decisions as well. David Stearns is still David Stearns, and we have to trust David Stearns because David has proved to us right away that you should have full faith in David. So I do not want to hear one schmuck of a fan all offseason long say, oh, the Mets made the wrong decision here, because quite frankly, you have no clue what you're talking about. I'm going to trust the diehard Mets fan growing up who took the Mets all the way to the NLCS in a year where they were so-called punting it. Miss me with that nonsense. I feel very confident, to say the least, about this team's future at the helm with David Stearns. Big Me Pete, great member, says, hey, Wardy, this is my 2025 Mets. Alvarez, Vientos, Mauricio, Bregman, Lindor, Nimmo, Robert, and Gilbert. I would love Robert. He'd be amazing. I got to be honest, though, I have a little interest in Alex Bregman at this point in time. Playoff heroics are great, but Bregman's home run splits are so drastic based on if he's playing at home or on the road in certain areas. Bregman hasn't been an East Coast guy at all throughout his pro career either. I have my reservations there. I feel like Bregman is one of those guys where you've already gotten the best that you're going to get from him there in Houston, especially playing in Minute Maid Park, whereas I don't think you're going to get nearly the same transition there consistently at Citi Field. I could be wrong, but we'll see what happens with Bregman, but that's more of really a shooting for the stars thing, where you'd shift Vientos there to first base or DH because Alonso walks, than anything else. I have not been on the Bregman wave the way that other fans have, because I really don't think it's realistic. And after what Vientos has done, there's really no reason to believe it's realistic right now, should Alonso return at least. Dave with a $5 donation says 2025 rotation: Snell, Burns, Senga, Peterson, Sproat, Miguel, Blackburn, and maybe Buehler. I don't think you're far off in the sense of the Mets trying to get one of those frontline starters for sure. I think Snell, Burns, they will be in the thick of it for sure. Snell is the guy that becomes a lot more appealing if the Mets can get a fancy structured contract down and not have to worry about a QO. That's definitely something that I think that they would have the interest in there. Pete with the $5 holla. Thank you so much for that, Pete. I greatly appreciate that. Isn't it hilarious that we see the punt year, right? The fabulous fake punt. I know he had everyone fooled. Everyone thinking he's going for the punt when in reality he's running it in for a touchdown is what he did. Let's see. Marcos, thank you so much for the kind words. We appreciate you chiming in as always, my man. David, how are you? Great member. Thank you for chiming in. Cherno, the $2 holla, says, I want Fried. Not likely, but imagine Braves fans would lose their mind if we got Fried. It would take an overpay one, and it would take Swain Fried to not go out west, back where he's from, which I don't foresee happening. I think Max Fried is a lock to land in the NL West for 2025 and beyond. Whether it's the Dodgers, whether it's the Padres, or whether it's the Arizona Diamondbacks in that realm, I think Max Fried, even San Francisco Giants, because we know that they're going to be overspending yet again, even with a change in the guard in their front office. I'm excited to see how Buster Posey does for them. There'll be a lot more discipline, I hope, but don't know exactly what you're getting there. All I know is I think he's going to land in the NL West, barring changes. I don't think the Braves are going to bring Fried back. I don't think they're at all going to want to spend the money it's going to take to keep him. And Renee, I understand if you're sad. A lot of us fans are sad right now. But that's also why we're kind of quickly transitioning into this offseason discussion here, because it's a nice kind of way to be like, all right, let's just kind of transition into this right away without it being overwhelming. Just have this natural discussion go from there. I am not actively covering the Rangers, no. As much as I wish I was, I just don't have the time to, nor the platform, or if I'm being completely frank, the revenue is just not there with my podcast the way that is here, that we do full time. And what I'll be doing with Knicks Media, that'll be a position I'll be doing weekly, but that's also going to be a lucrative position for myself as well. It's going to be more than just doing it because I'm a fan. It's also because I'm trying to keep everything afloat and be as active in the creator space as I possibly can with my favorite teams this offseason to my best of my abilities. But we do have what I want to share with you guys before we wrap up the show, because we will be wrapping up the show here shortly. My opinion of Brian Anderson, not the player, but the play caller that we heard for TBS, is that he is effing phenomenal. And I was very envious that the Mets did not get that man to call any key home run calls throughout the postseason for the Mets. It was a damn shame that they were stuck with FS1. Beatty will be traded to Palehouse and Robert deal. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, Dave. I don't think that's a lock, but we'll see, my man. Pete, thank you for the donation, too. Hockey's not a sport. Tell me you're a casual without telling me you're a casual, Kev. That's hilarious. Let me fix this real quick. If we're being completely frank, baseball is far less of a sport than hockey is. Hockey is a far more demanding sport than baseball will ever be, and that's an absolute fact. And I love baseball. Baseball is my favorite sport, but I can still confidently say that. as a big hockey fan as well. Let's see here. Okay, guys. Here we go. This is the free agent list. We got a lot of them, so we're just going to speed run and go down the list. Oh, wait, actually, let's go down 2 lists right now. We're going to go down 2. First, we're going to go down is who the Mets have under contract for 2025. Then we're going to speed run just some notable free agents as well, and then we'll kind of wrap up the show from there. I'm very proud of the Mets this season as well. 100% on Iglesias, absolutely Danny. But here's what the Mets have here for 2025 currently. Francisco Lindor, Starling Marte, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Kodai Senga, Edwin Diaz, Sean Manaea, Phil Maton, Paul Blackburn, David Pearson, Tyrone Taylor is actually under contract. Okay, so he still has team control. Tyler McGill, DJ Stewart, funny enough, Luis Torrens, Alex Young, Sean Reed-Foley, Mark Vientos, Tyler Zuber, who I think is going to impact the bullpen and surprise a lot of people next year. Came out of nowhere that the Mets picked up from the Rays and started the year with the Long Island Ducks after not being in the bigs for a couple years. Ronnie Mauricio, who I'm so excited to see what he can do heading into spring of next season. Francisco Alvarez, Luis Angel Acuna, Matt Gage, Reed Garrett, Eddie Alvarez, Brett Beatty, Alex Ramirez, Eric Orzi, Jose Azocar, Daniel Nunez, Kristen Scott, Danny Yan, Jose Budo, Oscar Brosman, and Grant Hartwig. These are all the guys that are currently on the books for the Mets in 2025. And as we know, the Mets are going to have a lot of money off the books, so they're really going to be working again with north of $200 million off the books that they can do whatever they want with. You know, they are going to be starting pretty much the offseason at right around the 150 mark or so there roughly when it comes to what they've spent. So for the $300, luxury tax, those kind of $300 million rather, the Mets have some nice wiggle room that they're going to work with. So even if you say invest in Juan Soto, and let's just say for shits and giggles, let's do a Juan Soto with no deferred money. Let's just say for the sake of argument, Juan Soto signed a 13-year deal at, we'll do $615 million. Let me just put this in my calculator right now. Give me a second. Okay. At $615 million divided by 13, we're looking at north of 50 mil a year, 47.3 to be exact. 47.3 and just investing in Juan Soto would still have the Mets with 100 mil to work with at minimum pretty much, if not more, this offseason. So, yeah, they can invest completely. They can give 50 mil AAV to Juan Soto if they want to. That is not out of the realm of possibility. And that is without including any potential deferred money. So bear that in mind as well, where you would likely have that down the road, because we've seen the deferred payments with a lot of guys as well. We saw it with Max Scherzer. That was the first one that really felt fairly notable outside of, the Bobby Bonillas, etc., like ones that were deferred but made sense. This is a guy that the Mets can really go after and throw out everything for, like literally everything, because he fits the timetable for the short and long-term vision. You sign Soto to a 13 to 15-year deal, and he's going to be about 40 when that contract is up. With the way they swing the bat, the way they so Barry Bonds-esque, and the way that his defense is already floundering half the time, the guy is destined to be a long-time, full-time DH, and one that's going to dominate and tear the cover off baseballs until he officially hangs it up. That is just how good Soto is, and that's why every team that has a chance to go after him, even including his former club and the Washington Nationals, will do everything that they can try to do to land him, as the Yankees will do everything that they can to try to bring him back, understandably so, to say the least. But now let's talk about the free agents that will be available here in the market as well, and then we're going to wrap it up, folks. They are as follows. He will get a 60 to 65 AAV. That should not happen. That really should not happen. Like, that's just absurd at that point. 50 feels like more than enough, their AAV for Soto. Because Soto is not going to take a short-term deal, but I could, however, see Soto signing like a massive deal at like 615 mil per se, but there's opt-outs. And there's multiple. I could see a world where there's opt-outs for Soto, where if he wants to opt out, say 6 or 7 years into the contract, like halfway mark, he could do that. And by the time he does that, he can opt out and get an even bigger bag as long as he's healthy and playing the best. So I think both things can be true. You can have the opt-out after, say, 6 years or so, and then go from there. while it's still being a greater contract of, say, 13 years total at minimum. Because it isn't going to be 10. It's going to be more than 10 for Soto. I'll be very shocked if he lands at just 10. With his age, he's going to be pushing for 13 to 15 more than likely, with some very creative opt-outs and language that I know only Scott Boras is going to likely be happy about. But speaking of Scott Boras, knowing the best when it comes to a lot of these free agents, here's Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. The Mets are officially off the books, don't have to deal with that nonsense anymore. Garrett Cole there is available as well, but he's not going anywhere. The Yankees are going to be keeping him. Juan Soto, we know. Blake Snell, we know. He's going to be opting out of, that player option. Again, we do have Blake Snell who can opt into his deal at, $38.5 million. But Snell, I think, is one that is absolutely going to be hitting the market and looking for a long-term deal, a bigger contract than what he's currently getting. Cody Bellinger back in the mix there. Belly, who has an opt-out there at $27.5 mil, whereas Snell has the player option there at $38.5. Paul Goldschmidt, the Mets won't touch. Teoscar Hernandez, again, Tio, great regular season, but as great of a regular season as this was for Teoscar Hernandez, he has not proven anything. I haven't seen anything overly in the playoffs. He did nothing this entire series, literally nothing. You could have went without Teoscar Hernandez the entire series, and the Dodgers still would have won the series in 6 against the Mets. That's how bad he was. Tio, underwhelming in high-pressure situations at times, but did have a home run and their 2-0 victory to beat the Padres in the NLDS, so that is notable. Tio, though, is a free agent. Patrick Corbin is finally a free agent, which is hilarious, so no more batting practice there for the Nationals. Robbie Ray has an opt-out there for the Giants. That is an interesting guy for teams to consider. Alonso's out there, Alex Bregman, Charlie Morton, Anthony Rizzo, Lucas Giolito, but he's coming off of TJ, and he'll be staying with the Red Sox. Michael Conforto is officially unrestricted free agent. I don't see the Mets going back to him, but I will say this. I wouldn't be opposed to Michael Conforto as a fourth outfielder. That would be sick. That would be like elite fourth outfielder. I would love that. Really would love that. But he would be limited. He would not be able to play center. So now that I see that, maybe I'm less interested. F.U. Rhys Hoskins, I would do anything and everything to just make sure you're never met. Josh Bell, Marcell Ozuna, Kenley Jansen, Michael Walker, Frankie Montas, Corbin Burns, Max Fried, Ryan Presley, Mitch Haniger, Gleyber Torres, Jack Flaherty, Yoan Moncada, Sean Manaea, the Samoan Southpaw, Kyle Hendricks, Mark Canha. We love ourselves some can of corn, baby. Shane Bieber, who's a big one there. Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, Justin Turner, the former Met, Nick Martinez, JD Martinez, Kyle Gibson, Andrew Heaney, Ross Stripling, Jock Pearson, Willie Adames, Anthony DeSclafani, Yusei Kikuchi there, David Robertson, Lance Lynn, Christian Walker, Harrison Bader, Rollis Chapman, Kevin Kiermaier, James McCann, F.U. James McCann. So glad we're finally not spending a dime on him. Drew Smiley, Manuel Margot, Eugenio Suarez on a mutual deal, Matt Moore, Alex Verdugo, Brandon Drury. There's a lot here. Walker Buehler, Blake Trinan. Holy shit, Blake Trinan is an unrestricted free agent. All right, I'm a complete hypocrite. And there's one reliever you do a slight overpay to, it's Blake Trinan. I've been obsessed with Blake Trinan for like the past 5 years. The guy's disgustingly good. His late movement is unheard of. I know that he's not going to want to leave LA, but holy shit, if the Mets are willing to do a slight overpay for a reliever, he's one of the few relievers I would go that way to do it to. Even with him being at the age of 36, I do not care. You guys all saw how Trinan just so comfortably shut down the Mets, right? He does that consistently. I would love David Robertson back as well, but that one I think is a little less likely to happen because it doesn't need to be prioritized at such a high value in the way it's going to happen. AJ Minter, I don't want AJ Minter. I don't want that. I don't want that southpaw from the Braves, if I'm being completely honest. I'm cool without him. I'm not opposed to getting southpaw option, but I would, if he heals up in time, I would love for us to run it back with Brooks Raley. But, guys, there are a lot of free agent options for the Mets to choose from, as there are a lot of trade options for the Mets to choose from. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be coming out with plenty of content for each and every one of you on these respective topics. So make sure you guys are chiming in live and on replay for all the following content, guys. We're going to have you covered with guys we think will be returning the Mets. We're going to have content on guys we think will be leaving. We're going to have content on guys we think the Mets are going to acquire. And we're going to have content on just all the latest rumblings in Mets land, including prospect talks. We'll be getting into plenty throughout the course of the offseason, folks. I want to thank you all so much for watching live and a replay. It really does mean a lot. I'm going to get out of here now because I have myself a late night and we're going to have an early day tomorrow. tomorrow. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Make sure you smash that like and subscribe on your way out in case you haven't already. To all my replay viewers, let us know in the comments down below, which free agents do you hope the Mets keep internally the most, and which free agents do you hope the Mets land externally the most? Let's hear it in the chat, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Shout out to BetUS, our amazing sponsor of the show, as always. And I'll see you guys all probably tomorrow, if not the following day, for more New York Metropolitan content. Have a great night, everybody. Appreciate you, Cam. Appreciate you, David. Appreciate you, Alex. All you great members in the live chat. I'll see you guys on